Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to discuss the chapter Introduction to Communication of Block 1 of the paper English for Business and Professional Communication of Srinarayana Guru Open University. So, let's begin. Communication. Communication is the exchange of information between two or more people. It involves one person transmitting an idea or message to another person or group. The aim of communication is shared understanding between the sender or receiver. Both parties must use the same system of symbols, words, signs, or behaviors to understand each other. Misinterpretation can occur if the receiver decodes the message differently than intended. Process of communication. Here is a short explanation of the step-by-step communication process. Sender. The sender is the person initiating the communication and conveying the message. He decides what information needs to be communicated. Encoding. The sender encodes the intended message into a form that can be transmitted. It may involve translating the data into signals such as speech, writing, visuals, gestures, etc. Message. The encoded message is the actual information or ideas being exchanged between the sender and receiver. The message can be verbal or non-verbal. Channel. The channel is the medium through which the encoded message is transmitted from the sender to the receiver. Examples of channel include face-to-face communication, telephone, email, TV, and social media for communication. Decoding. The receiver interprets the message using selective processes. The receiver decodes the message by assigning meaning to the symbols transmitted by the sender. Receiver. The individual or the individuals to whom the sender conveys the encoded message. The receiver has to be able to understand the communication. Feedback. Feedback is the receiver's response or reaction to the message. It helps to confirm the message was received and understood. It improves the effectiveness of communication. Context. The situation, environment, and context in which the communication occurs influence how the message is conveyed, interpreted, and received. Noise. Any kind of interference or barriers that affect the transmission or decoding of the message. It distorts communication between the sender and receiver. This 8-step communication illustrates how information gets successfully shared or exchanged between the sender and receiver through encoding, transmitting, and decoding messages. Verbal and non-verbal communication. Verbal and non-verbal communication are the main methods by which people exchange information and messages. Verbal communication refers to the exchange of information or ideas through spoken words. It includes communication that uses speech and language to express a message. Examples of verbal communication include speaking face to face, phone conversations, lectures, presentations, and written communication like emails, text, books, and reports. Nonverbal communication involves transmitting information without the use of words. It relies on non-spoken cues like facial expressions, gestures, body language, posture, tone of voice, touch, and visuals. It can include smiling, crying, yawning, grimacing, laughing, etc. Other examples include making hand motions, nodding, and shaking the head, raising eyebrows, rolling the eyes, and shrugging shoulders. Both types of communication work together to effectively transmit messages, express thoughts and feelings, build relationships, and interact with others. Using verbal and nonverbal communication strategically can facilitate understanding between people. Difference between verbal and nonverbal communication. Verbal communication involves the use of words spoken or written. Non-verbal communication involves using body language, facial expressions, gestures, posture, tone of voice, etc. Verbal communication can be easily recorded and transmitted through various mediums such as text, email, or video conferencing. Non-verbal communication is often instant and difficult to record or transmit accurately. Verbal communication can convey a lot of specific information such as facts, ideas, and instructions. Non-verbal communication can convey emotions, attitudes, and social cues expressed through words alone. Verbal communication can be used to persuade, negotiate, or influence others through logical arguments. Non-verbal communication can be used to build trust, establish rapport, and create emotional connections. Verbal communication can be easily edited or revised before it is delivered. Nonverbal communication is often spontaneous and immediate, making it harder to control or modify. Verbal communication can be easily disrupted by external noise or distractions. Nonverbal communication can continue to communicate even without words and in noisy environments. Verbal communication can be delivered remotely through technology such as phone or video calls. Verbal communication can be hindered by technological limitations or lack of physical presence. Verbal communication can be formal or informal depending on the context of relationship between communicators. Nonverbal communication can be spontaneous and informal, often reflecting genuine emotions and reactions. Verbal communication can involve interactive dialogue and questioning for clarification or feedback. Nonverbal communication can involve reciprocal, nonverbal responses and cues between communicators. Verbal communication is typically learned through formal education, training, or practice. Nonverbal communication is learned through observation, experience, and cultural exposure. Communication channels. A communication channel refers to the medium or pathway through which a message is transmitted from the sender to the receiver during communication. They are how information and messages get conveyed between a sender and receiver. Communication channels facilitate the transmission of communication between multiple parties. Channels can use different senses of communication: auditory, visual, tactile, olfactory, etc. Communication channels include face to face conversations, telephone calls, video conferencing, emails, television broadcasts, social media platforms, written letters, reports, etc. Channels may be verbal or non-verbal. Effective communication requires selecting an appropriate channel for transmitting the message to the intended audience. Channels influence communication by filtering, clarifying, or distorting the message during transmission. They can have different capacities for carrying information based on attributes like speed, reach, and accessibility. Multiple channels are often used together in modern communication rather than relying on just one medium or mode. Audience analysis. Audience analysis refers to evaluating the intended audience for a communication message to determine the best way to craft and deliver information to that particular group. It involves efforts to understand an audience, including demographic characteristics such as age, gender, ethnicity, education level, profession, etc. Knowledge level, such as their degree of familiarity with the topic being communicated, attitudes and beliefs, such as their current feelings, opinions, and cultural values related to the subjects, needs and interests, like what information they find useful and relevant, and communication preferences, like how they like to receive communications. Performing audience analysis enables a sender to tailor his communication approach and messages to be most effective for receivers. It helps answer key questions like what key points need explanation versus can be assumed as familiar. What tone and language choices will resonate best with the audience? What communication channels or formats will the audience be most receptive to? How can the information be made most interesting and relevant? What objectives might the audience have and how can they be addressed? Considering these factors through audience analysis allows communicators to shape their message and delivery in a way that will meaningfully connect with the particular audience. It leads to more targeted, impactful communication. Inclusive language. Inclusive language refers to words and phrases that aim to avoid excluding particular groups or making assumptions about people's identities. Some examples are using gender neutral terms like staff or employees rather than workman or salesman, avoiding gendered pronouns like he, him, his when the gender is unknown or irrelevant, using they and them as a singular pronoun. Avoiding ableist language that marginalizes people with disabilities like blind spot or falling on deaf ears. Using identity first language like person with a disability rather than disabled person. Avoiding ethnic, racial, or cultural stereotypes in metaphors and analogies. For example, not using phrases like gift or Indian giver which have offensive origins. Using respectful terms for different age groups like older adults rather than seniors or elderly. Being sensitive to economic and social class differences by avoiding blanket terms like the homeless. You must avoid generalizing and assuming anyone's background, experiences, or preferences based on their perceived identity. The goal is to make language more inclusive of all people and avoid marginalizing, stereotyping, or making assumptions about entire groups. Inclusive language acknowledges diversity and treats all people with respect. Barriers to communication. Communication barriers refer to factors that can hinder the effective exchange of information between the sender and receiver of the message. Some common barriers include language barriers, when the sender and the receiver do not speak the same language or use different meanings of words or phrases. Cultural barriers. Differences in culture and norms can lead to misinterpretation. For example, gestures, signs, and body language can have different meanings across cultures. Physical barriers. Environmental factors like noise, distance, faulty equipment, etc., hinder message transmission. Emotional barriers. Strong emotions like anger, fear, distress, etc., can inhibit objectivity, listening, and understanding the message. Perceptual barriers. Differences in perceptions, thoughts, opinions, ideas, and viewpoints between communicators. Attitudinal barriers. Any pre existing negative attitudes, bias, or assumptions that a sender or receiver holds about the other person can lead to prejudice and close mindedness, hindering effective communication between them. Stereotyping, a barrier to effective communication because it involves making biased assumptions about individuals based on preconceived notions about their groups rather than understanding them as unique individuals. Prejudice, a major barrier to effective communication because it leads us to judge or dismiss others before truly listening to and understanding their perspective. Behavior barriers refers to actions or behaviors that prevent the effective exchange of information between people, such as inattention, impatience, distraction, or defectiveness. Gender barriers. Miscommunication arising from the male female differences in communication styles. Technological barriers. Problems with technology mediums like email, video conferencing, etc. can disrupt communication. Information overload. Too much information can overwhelm and confuse the receiver. Overcoming barriers requires identifying and addressing the specific barriers at play in each communication scenario. Effective communication needs to be aware of potential barriers and try to minimize them. Intercultural communication. Intercultural communication refers to exchanging ideas, information, and meaning between people from different cultural backgrounds. It involves bringing together people of diverse upbringings, languages, values, customs, attitudes, and behaviors. The goal is to communicate effectively and appropriately across these differences. It requires developing an understanding of various cultures. Each culture has its distinct patterns of verbal and non-verbal communication. For instance, cultural norms around self-expression, directness, confrontation, and intimacy vary widely. Even space, time, and silence take on different meanings. Being aware of these variations can help prevent miscommunications. These are the topics which are included in this chapter. I hope all of you had understood this video and thank you for watching.